All right, tonight we slip through the snow, past the twisted shapes of bare trees, across a muddy, rutted path that's frozen solid under your aching feet. Your breath fogs the air, your wool cloak is stiff with frost, and somewhere out there a wolf howls. But you press forward toward the dull orange glow ahead, a peasant's hut barely clinging to warmth, half sunk in the white hush of a medieval winter night. You duck inside just before the wind cuts through your last layer of decency. It's dim. It smells like turnip smoke and sweat, plus something distinctly animal. A single candle flickers, fighting the cold drafts leaking through the thatched roof. Your fingers stiff and red, barely unfasten your cloak. But you've made it. You're in. And now you need to sleep. Only it's not that easy. It's the 1300s. There's no central heating, no mattress, no tick-tock lullabies. Just you, a straw-stuffed sack, some itchy wool, and maybe your cousin snoring like a broken bellows. Yes, medieval peasants slept through winter. No, you probably wouldn't survive a week of it. Before you settle in, do me a favor. Subscribe before you fall asleep. We can't guarantee comfort, but we can promise oddly relaxing suffering through history. And drop your location and local time in the comments. We're mapping a global guild of insomniacs. You're among friends. Now go ahead and kill the overhead light, maybe throw a blanket over your shoulders, or crack the window just a bit to let in that perfectly spooky breeze. It's story time, and tonight, we freeze. You've just crossed the threshold of a medieval peasant home in December. You're exhausted from hauling firewood and manure. The sky's been grey for weeks, and sunset now comes at what feels like lunchtime. The day has ended, but the night is just getting started. The cold slithers in, first through gaps in the timber frame, between the moss-packed walls, under the crooked door. The entire structure creaks when the wind shoves against it, as if the house itself wants to leave for the city. You shuffle toward the hearth, where a few meager embers glow under a pile of ash. No roaring fire here. Wood is precious. Most peasants don't even burn logs. They burn dried peat dung, or if it's been a particularly generous day, brushwood so green it steams instead of crackles. The fire isn't just for warmth, it's for cooking, drying wet clothes, keeping spirits and spirits away. It's the lifeblood of the home. But it doesn't reach the corners, not even close. A dog growls low in the corner. Or is that the pig? Hard to tell in this light. You give a courteous nod to a lump of cloth that may or may not be your neighbor's second cousin. Someone coughs. No one says goodnight. It's assumed. It's embedded in the scratch of wool and the smell of garlic rubbed on toes to keep the frost from crawling in. You begin peeling off your outer layer, or you don't. Many peasants sleep fully clothed. Some even add more layers before lying down. Clothes aren't for fashion. They're insulation, a form of armor against the elements. Underclothes, a tunic, maybe another over that. And don't forget the hat. Always the hat. You can't risk heat escaping through your scalp, your body's chimney. Outside, the snow taps on the thatch like a cold hand asking to come in. The roof groans again. You lie down, not on a mattress, but on a lumpy pile of straw stuffed into a sagging sack or spread in a corner. If you're lucky, it's new straw. If not, it's shared, reused, and beginning to compost itself into something vaguely sentient. Above you, smoke stains bloom across the rafters. Ghosts of every fire burned in that hearth. You wrap yourself in a wool blanket, coarse, scratchy, woven thick, and feel the prickle of something moving inside. Probably a flea. Maybe 3. It's not even worth brushing away. They'll be back. They always come back. The cold is not merely a temperature here. It's a condition of living. It presses into your chest, nestles between your toes, bites at your nose no matter how tightly you wrap your scarf. Some parts of your body begin to feel warm. That's the dangerous kind of warm. That's maybe frostbite is starting warm. But you're used to it. Or you pretend to be. Everyone does. Some nights you sleep by the hearth if there's room. Some nights you sleep with your siblings. Some nights you spoon your pig. Heat is heat. And survival doesn't care about modern notions of personal space. There's even a bit of superstition woven into the discomfort. If you sleep too warm, your soul gets lazy. Probably made up by someone who couldn't afford firewood. Historians still argue whether peasants really suffered as much as we imagine, or if they developed natural tolerances we've since lost. One thing's for sure, they knew the rhythms of cold. When to layer up, when to huddle, when to give up on comfort entirely and just aim for not dead. You hear a baby crying in the next room. Not that there is a next room, just a partition, maybe a thin board or a hanging curtain. The hut is one space, one stove, one source of warmth, light food, and dreams. Someone coughs again. That wet, rattly kind. A familiar sound. The kind that sometimes lingers until spring and sometimes doesn't. You pull your blanket higher and wish it were heavier, or maybe that the pig were closer. Above you, the beams shift as the snow on the roof piles higher. You close your eyes. Tomorrow you'll rise with the grey dawn. You'll gather frozen beets, break the ice off the water bucket. Pretend your boots are still boots and not just crunchy socks. But for now, you sleep. Or try to. It takes a while before your body stops shivering. Not because it's warm, no, not even close, but because eventually your body just gives up the protest. You go from teeth chattering to jaw-clenching silence, a numb calm that settles in like a second blanket, one made of denial. But let's take a look at the hut you're sleeping in. You've already felt the cold leaking in from every crevice, but now that your eyes adjust, you begin to truly see the shape of your shelter. First off, it's small, very small, maybe 12 by 20 feet on a generous day. The ceiling's low enough that you can reach up and touch the rafters with ease if you dare. There's no insulation, none that works anyway. The walls are timber frames packed with wattle and daub, which sounds fancy until you remember that daub is basically a mix of straw, clay mud, and animal dung. Yes, poop, insulation. You sleep inside a compostable thermos, more or less. And the roof, thatched, a thick layer of straw laid over a wood frame, excellent at shedding water, not so excellent at blocking wind. Wind which in winter doesn't politely knock, but barrels through the village like an angry ghost. The thatch is alive too. Mice nest in it. Bugs drop from it. Sometimes birds take up residence, which sounds cute, until they poop on your blanket. You look at the door. It's barely a door. More of a wooden slab hung on crude hinges with no lock, no seal, and no promise of keeping out weather wolves or nosy neighbors. Cold air rushes in through the bottom gap. Some families stuff it with rags or straw, but it never fully works. Drafty walls weren't a defect. They were just normal. You shift on your straw bedding. The floor beneath is packed dirt, and no, it's not dry. In winter, it sweats cold dampness. Some peasants try to cover it with rushes, dry grass, or reeds spread like a carpet. But over time, those rushes mix with food scraps, animal hair, and human waste, turning into a slippery, smelly mat. Think of it as medieval linoleum, but with extra fermentation. Above your head, a narrow hole in the roof acts as a chimney, or at least it tries. Smoke curls and swirls, never quite finding its way out. The ceiling is black with soot. Your lungs are part fireplace. You rub your eyes, and they sting. But again, that's the trade-off. Smoke equals warmth equals life, or at least less death. You hear a thump. Someone on the other side of the wall, if you can call it that, just rolled over. Thin planks separate you from your neighbor. And even then, only if you're lucky enough to live in a house with interior partitions. Most don't. One-room homes were the norm. The fire, the family, the food, the animals, all together all the time. Medieval open concept, but make it survival mode. Historians still argue whether peasants considered these huts temporary shelters or long-term homes. Some believe families often rebuilt every few decades. Others say generations lived and died in the same leaning structure, patching holes with whatever they had, rags, reeds, or good intentions. You think you hear wind again, but no, it's the wall. It breathes. In winter, the house bends and creaks, responding to the cold like an old man muttering in his sleep. You tighten your cloak and curl inward, becoming a human croissant, trying to trap any remaining heat. The architecture isn't just about size or sturdiness. It's about class. Nobles, they sleep in stone keeps with fireplaces, rugs, and servants. You sleep inches from the outdoors with a draft that could shave your eyebrows off. It's not personal. It's feudalism. Your neighbor once tried stuffing sheep's wool into the wall gaps to block the wind. It helped until rats chewed it out. Another family used a dead rabbit. You don't ask where it went. And don't forget the smell. That's part of the home too. Smoke, sweat, damp earth, animal breath, the occasional waft of fermented cabbage soup. Some peasants hung dried herbs to mask the odor, lavender if they were fancy, wormwood if they were desperate. It helped, but only so much. Eventually, your nose stops noticing. That's your brain's mercy gift. You reach up to touch a timber beam. It's cold, sticky, covered in soot and old spider webs. A spider might crawl across your blanket later. You'll brush it off. That's just bedtime in 1342. And yet, this place is home. You know the creaks. You know the rhythm of the wind moving through the rafters. You know exactly where the weak spot in the wall is the one that leaks snow during a blizzard. You know that in the corner, under a mound of straw, someone has a hunk of dried cheese, and tomorrow you'll argue about who ate it. Fringe accounts even describe peasants insulating their homes with fresh manure walls. That's right, stacking bricks of dung along the outside to act as insulation. Is that smell? Yes. Is it warm? Also, yes. It's called poor man's masonry, and it worked better than nothing, which in medieval Europe was the prevailing design aesthetic. By now, the hut has gone mostly quiet. The fire is barely a whisper. Someone coughs. Someone else mumbles in their sleep. Outside, the wind kicks snow against the walls like fists. But inside, you're still here, breathing, resting, enduring. You close your eyes again and try to imagine it's warmer. Maybe one day you'll visit a manor house and see a bed with curtains, a stone fireplace, and real glass windows. But tonight, your ceiling is thatch, your insulation is dirt and dung, and your lullaby is the wind wheezing through your home's skeleton. Sleep tight. The straw pokes through the thin cloth sack beneath your spine. You wiggle, trying to shift your weight so the sharpest stalks jab a less sensitive rib. Not much luck. There's no such thing as a comfort zone here, only different degrees of tolerable discomfort. This is your bed. And in a world without mattress stores, IKEA, or even the concept of springs, it's surprisingly high-tech for its time. Most peasant families sleep on bedding called a pallet, a thick pad stuffed with straw hay or reeds tied shut with rough cloth or burlap. If you're lucky, it's filled with oat straw, which is softer. If you're very lucky, someone changed it recently, and the mold colonies haven't fully moved in. The pallet sits directly on the dirt floor, or sometimes a low wooden frame if you're slightly better off or know someone handy. That frame, however, creaks like an old sailor's knees and seems to attract spiders with a vengeance. You suspect they pay rent under there. On top of you is a wool blanket, coarse brownish grey and heavy. It scratches like a pet cat with commitment issues. Wool is a godsend in this weather. It insulates even when wet and lasts forever, which is good because yours was probably handed down from your grandmother's grandmother and smells vaguely like goat. Under that is another layer, or two. Peasants didn't change into night clothes. They added to their day wear. Cloaks became comforters. Extra tunics were thrown on top. The more layers, the better. Quilts, stuffed with feathers or flaxseed husks, were known in some parts, but they were rare treasures. If you had one, you didn't just sleep under it, you guarded it like a dragon hoarding treasure. You curled tighter, pressing your knees to your chest, nose buried in your sleeve. Your breath warms the wool slightly, and you sigh into the microclimate you've just created. But you're not alone in this bed. Sleeping arrangements weren't about privacy, they were about practicality. Entire families slept together in the same bed, or within a few feet of one another, often beneath one large blanket or several overlapping ones. Children, parents, even grandparents huddled together like a pile of laundry given sentience. Why body heat? That's the secret. The warmest thing in the room isn't the fire, it's the people. The more bodies, the warmer it gets. If you're the youngest, congratulations, you're sleeping on the edge where the cold drafts live. If you're elderly or a baby, you're in the middle. That's prime real estate. Oh, and let's not forget your bedfellows of the non-human variety. Yes, the pig is here again. It's curled near your feet, snoring louder than your uncle, radiating warmth like a squishy hot water bottle with hooves. In winter, peasants often brought livestock inside. Not just pigs, but goats, chickens, even cows, depending on the family and size of the home. Partly for warmth, partly for security, and partly because where else would you put them? Fringe accounts mention that in especially cold winters, people would use the bed warming services of heated stones or bricks wrapped in cloth. They'd place them under the blankets an hour before bed, then remove them hopefully before accidentally searing a thigh. Some used iron pans filled with embers, a medieval version of an electric blanket, minus the not setting things on fire part. Historians still debate whether wealthier peasants managed to get their hands on feather beds or real mattresses. Some records suggest yes, but those would be passed down like heirlooms, patched and restuffed endlessly. For most, the humble straw pallet was standard, replaced once or twice a year when the bugs got too aggressive or the smell became too vivid. And about those bugs, oh yes, they're here. Lice, fleas, and bed bugs weren't occasional nuisances. They were permanent residents. Some people tried sprinkling dried mint or lavender in the bedding to repel them. Others embraced the inevitable and scratched themselves through the night, muttering curses that probably doubled as folk medicine. You shift again. There's a ridge in the straw that presses like a dagger into your lower back. You try to ignore it, focusing instead on the rhythmic snoring around you, moments of peace interrupted by a cough, a grunt, or the unmistakable sound of someone breaking wind under the blanket. No judgment. Warmth is warmth. The floor creaks slightly as someone gets up, probably headed for the pot. You'll deal with that situation later. The door groans open and then slams shut, shaking the entire wall like a warning. The candle flickers and gutters out. Darkness fills the room like a thick woolen fog. You don't panic. You've been here before. You pull the blanket up to your chin and listen to the silence between snores. A mouse scuttles in the thatch above. You imagine it wearing a tiny scarf, trying to get warm too. You wonder if it sleeps with other mice in a tangle of tails and fuzz. Probably. You think about the bed you saw once at church, an image in a stained glass window of Mary resting on soft cushions in a heavenly bed. Must be nice. No straw, no fleas, probably no pigs either. Your cousin elbows you in the ribs as they roll over. You let out a quiet oof, then settle again. The wind rattles the walls. The pig snuffles in its sleep. And somehow you start to drift. You wake just a little, not fully just enough to shift your leg away from the pig's cold, clammy snout pressed against your shin. The room is dark, but you feel the quiet stretch of time. You've lost track of how long you've been lying here, maybe an hour, maybe 3. The fire is dead now, not even a glow left. And next to you, someone's gone. You notice it not from sound, but from the drop in heat. A little pocket of cold, like the warmth's been scooped away. You're not surprised. People don't always sleep straight through the night. In fact, most don't. Medieval sleep often came in 2 chunks. First sleep and second sleep, with an hour or 2 of strange wakefulness in between. This wasn't insomnia, it was routine. You roll onto your other side. Across the room, you hear whispers. Someone's talking low and gravelly. Maybe a parent checking on a sick child. Maybe a prayer. Or maybe, just maybe, they're tending to the fire again. You wonder if it's your turn. See, sleeping wasn't a solo act. It wasn't just about rest. It was part of the household's survival strategy. Someone always had to keep an ear on the fire, the animals, the wind and the roof. Embers had to be stirred before they died out completely. Someone had to pee and dump the pot. Someone had to nudge the pig if it snored too loud, or worse, rolled over and crushed the baby. So many families slept in shifts, at least informally. Not because they wanted to, because they had to. In winter, the night is long. Long enough that you get your first sleep 4 or 5 hours wake for a while, and then settle into a second round before dawn. In that quiet window between, people prayed, read, if they were literate, and had light-told stories or did other things, let's say, that helped keep the population steady. Historians still argue about how widespread this 2-sleep rhythm was. Some claim it was nearly universal, especially in Northern Europe. Others suggest it varied by class and climate. But the references are there: old diaries, letters, medical texts. A priest in the 1400s complains of parishioners rising after their first sleep to gossip or worse. A doctor recommends the midnight break as the ideal time for digestion. Very thoughtful. Back in your hut, someone has returned to bed. You feel their weight press back into the straw beside you, a creak and a sigh. The air warms again, ever so slightly. You curl closer. Even children slept in pairs or clusters, not only for warmth, but for safety. Wolves weren't the only threat. Sometimes it was rats, or fire, or in deeply unlucky cases, burglars. Though really, what was there to steal a wooden spoon? Bed partners weren't always family either. In larger households, say farms with hired hands or apprentices, you might be assigned to share a pallet with a total stranger. No introductions needed. You smell like cabbage and sawdust. Get in. Travelers too often found themselves bunking in barns or communal inns with multiple strangers in the same bed. Some inns were so packed, guests would literally rent half a bed. No curtains, no privacy. Just an elbow to the face if you turned too fast. The wealthy, of course, had options. Beds with curtains, beds with canopies, beds with multiple feather-stuffed layers and ornate carvings that could double as real estate, but you share everything. Even the warmth your own body makes. A fringe detail from old records, some beds weren't just for sleep. They were used as multi-use furniture since space was tight. During the day, the bed might be repurposed as a bench, a work surface, even a table if flipped and propped. Just brush off the straw and ignore the pig prints. You rub your eyes, trying to see something, anything, in the dark. But no moonlight makes it through the smoke-blackened thatch. Only your ears are awake now. You listen to the creak of the walls, the wet shuffle of snow sliding off the roof, the low groan of the wind curling around the hut like a hungry cat. Your stomach growls. You ignore it. Meals are small in winter. Maybe some porridge if you're lucky. Maybe bread and onion. You dream of honey, of warm milk, of not chewing on ice for hydration. You stretch one hand out, brushing against another person's wool sleeve. Reassurance. They're here. You're not alone. At the hearth, the embers give a faint sigh. Someone must have stirred them. You smell a tiny whiff of smoke. With luck, no one needs to get up again. But then again, luck is rare in winter. Someone will need to urinate again soon. Someone's child will cry. The pig will snore. Someone's back will cramp. That's the rhythm of the night. It's not silence. It's constant negotiation. No one calls it that, of course. It's just life. And now, somehow sleep returns. Your first round was rough. But now your body has adjusted your limbs numb, but calm your breathing steady. The second sleep begins. And it might actually be warm this time, when morning is still hours away and the fire's ghost barely smolders. You shift again in your nest of scratchy wool and rustling straw. Your nose is cold. Actually, everything is cold except the pig, who's now dangerously close to using your calf as a pillow. But despite the bitter air, you don't take off any clothing. In fact, you might put more on. That's because, in the medieval world, sleeping was not a time for undressing. Quite the opposite. Bedtime meant layering up like an onion, or maybe a cabbage, less delicious, more practical. You already have your base tunic, maybe two. Over that, a second tunic, or a cloak, depending on how many garments your family owns. Cloaks are especially prized because they trap heat well and double as daytime outerwear. And yes, you're sleeping in your boots. Why? Because removing them might mean finding them frozen stiff in the morning. Also, your toes appreciate any insulation they can get, even if it smells like wet sheep. You adjust your hood, pulling it tighter over your ears. Hats in bed might seem quaint now, but they were vital in drafty huts. Most body heat escapes through your head, so unless you enjoy waking up with frost-kissed earlobes, you sleep capped like a Dickens character, except with more lice. The clothes you wear to sleep are often the same ones you wore all day. Laundry is a luxury, and in winter washing is done only when absolutely necessary. That means your layers are dirty, smoky, and a little bit alive. You haven't seen soap in days. you haven't seen warm water in weeks. But honestly, who needs a bath when it's 20 degrees inside and snowing indoors? Historians still debate how many layers medieval peasants wore to bed. Some sources claim 3 to 5 garments. Others suggest entire wardrobes were involved, especially in colder regions. And while layering was standard, what varied was the quality of fabric. Coarse wool was for most. Only the rich had access to fine linen or fur. You remember hearing about furs, once soft, warm, luxurious. But for peasants, fur usually came from necessity, not glamour. You might have a rabbit pelt stitched into your cloak if your family traps. Or you might share a heavy sheepskin passed down so many generations that it has more patches than original wool. And then there are the truly desperate materials. Fringe mentions in some local records describe peasants stuffing their clothes with dried grass feathers or even crushed nettles, hoping to trap heat. Not ideal and certainly itchy, but when survival's on the line, comfort becomes optional. As you lie there, swaddled like a medieval burrito, you try to find the right position. One arm inside your tunic to keep warm, the other tucked under your body for safekeeping. You could shift again, but you'd have to rearrange every sleeve, hem, and fold. You settle for stillness. Movement equals exposure. Exposure equals regret. Next to you, your sibling coughs. You hear the telltale creak of someone reaching for another layer, maybe a tattered blanket or a spare tunic used as a shawl. You smile weakly in the dark, remembering the time someone tried sleeping inside an empty grain sack for warmth. It worked, until the mouse arrived. You've also heard tales of peasants sleeping near fire pits with blankets soaked in sheep's fat to block wind and retain heat. Disgusting, absolutely, but effective. If it doesn't catch fire, it might just save you from freezing. It's all about compromise. One ancient trick still in use, wearing your belt to bed. Not for style, not even for safety, but because removing it means extra effort in the morning. And when your fingers are numb from cold, lacing up a belt could take half the day. Best to sleep ready for action. You remember a local priest's warning once that sleeping fully clothed is a sign of the devil's influence. Something about inviting impure dreams. That priest, however, had a heated rectory and a woolen mattress. You choose your sins wisely. The night stretches on. Your body is stiff, but at least it's not frozen. Clothing was more than warmth. It was your survival kit. Every garment served a purpose. Sleeves could be pulled over fingers as makeshift mittens. Cloaks doubled as curtains. Even hats could be shared, passed back and forth, like sacred relics between siblings during particularly cruel winters. And unlike today, clothes weren't disposable. They were repaired endlessly. A tunic might be patched with mismatched fabric until it resembled a quilt. You know someone who wore the same breeches from age 10 to 20, adjusting only with string and prayer. You shift again. The belt digs into your waist. A boot squeaks as your foot flexes. Your neck itches, and you resist the urge to scratch. Lice are awake at night too. Still layered up like this, you're doing all right. Your own breath keeps your face warm. Your armpits are portable furnaces. And between the wool, the cloak, the sibling, and the pig, you've created something that vaguely resembles comfort, or at least the medieval version of it. Tomorrow, you'll peel off these layers with frozen fingers. Your undertunic will be damp from sweat. Your outer cloak will smell of smoke and possibly pig. You'll air everything near the fire, rub your boots with animal fat, and relayer like a cold weather artisan. But for now, in your mountain of wool and grime, and stubborn body heat, you sleep. Mostly. Somewhere above you, a beam lets out a groan, deep and tired, like a grandmother's sigh. You crack one eye open and blink into the smoky dark. The fire has dwindled again, just a faint red heartbeat in the ash. The hut is still, but the air is not. Smoke hangs low in the room, pressing against the ceiling like a ghost that's forgotten how to leave. Your throat scratches. Your eyes sting. Welcome to the world of medieval indoor air quality. You sit up slightly, pulling the blanket over your nose. It's not just the cold you're protecting yourself from, it's the soot. Because in this world, chimneys are still a luxury, and what you have is far more rustic, a smoke hole. No, not a chimney. A smoke hole. A literal hole in the roof where the smoke hopes to escape. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Most of the time, it swirls lazily through the room, coating everything in a slow dusting of ash. The rafters, the blankets, the pig. You squint upward and see the black streaks crawling up the sloped ceiling. That's not paint. That's years of fires past, memorialized in tar and soot. If you reach up and touch it, your fingers come away black. If you leave your laundry near the hearth, congratulations. Your white undertunic is now permanently gray. And let's not forget, there's no flue, no adjustable airways, just fire and faith. The hearth itself is a depression in the center of the room, or sometimes against one wall. Built of stone or packed earth, it's less a fireplace and more of a smoldering crater. If you're lucky, there's a basic hood above it to guide the smoke up. If you're very lucky, you've got a chimney stack built with bricks. But chances are you don't. You've got a wholesome soot and a lungful of medieval ambience. Historians still argue when and how chimneys became common in peasant homes. Some say it wasn't until the 16th century. Others claim they existed earlier, but were rare and often poorly built. What's clear is this: most homes like yours relied on open hearths and open plans, with the entire family sharing a single smoky space. And let's be honest, the smoke does more than blind you. It keeps the insects down. Fleas, lice, and even rats aren't fans of constant smoke. So while you cough and wipe tears from your eyes, you might remind yourself it's better than bugs. Mostly, you lie back down and adjust your hood. The smoke curls over you, clinging to your skin. Your clothes smell like burning dung and wet straw, which makes sense, because that's what the fire's fueled by tonight. You burned the last of the firewood days ago. Now, it's animal droppings, dried carefully into patties and stacked near the door. They don't burn hot, but they burn long. And they're free if you're willing to shovel. Fringe accounts even describe some peasants burning bones. Yes, animal bones cracked and dried, tossed onto the fire for an extra hour of brittle warmth. They pop like knuckles. It's morbid, sure, but so is freezing to death. The problem, though, is the ventilation, or lack of it. You remember when your cousin tried to make a makeshift vent out of a cracked pot and some rope? It collapsed within a week, and you all spent the rest of December sleeping with headaches. A few people in the village claim headaches are caused by bad humors, but you know it's the smoke. It's always the smoke. You try not to cough again. The sound might wake someone, and once people are awake, things get chaotic. Babies cry, pigs grunt. Someone trips over the chamber pot. Silence is golden, even if it smells like burnt cabbage. You turn on your side and stare toward the hearth. Someone's piled a few sticks next to it for morning kindling. The pile is pathetically small. Firewood is scarce. You remember chopping some weeks ago, when the ground wasn't yet frozen. Your axe bit deep into damp logs, and your hands stung for hours afterward. That wood is long gone. Now every night you gamble, burn enough to keep the chill off, but not so much that you run out before next week. It's a balancing act of heat and scarcity. And yet there's comfort in the flicker. Even this dying ember offers reassurance. The fire is still alive, which means you are still alive. It's symbolic, elemental. In a world ruled by darkness, the hearth is your anchor. You shift your gaze to the smoke hole again. It's open just enough to let out fumes, and just big enough to let in snow wind, and the occasional suicidal bird. Once a raven fell through and landed on your mother's head. She didn't sleep for 3 days after that. Superstition, or maybe just trauma. Still, the smoke hole is vital. Without it, the house would become an oven of ash and suffocation. And in fact, some people did die that way. There are tales in every village of someone who smothered during the night, fire crackling low, air too thick to breathe. It's not common, but common enough to keep you wary. You rub your eyes again. Your fingers come away black with soot. You breathe in shallowly and try to remember the taste of clean air. Maybe in spring. Maybe when the wind blows from the right direction. Maybe in your dreams. You roll over face buried in your cloak, blocking the worst of the smoke. The fire is still there whispering in its ashes, and you layered coughing, slightly crispy sleep on. Because that's just how it is. You're not sure what wakes you, maybe a draft, maybe the sound of something shifting at your feet. You open your eyes just a crack. It's still dark. The fire's nearly dead, but something warm and heavy has repositioned itself on your leg. Oh, right. It's the pig. Again, you let out a small sigh, not loud enough to wake anyone, but just enough to make peace with your reality. Yes, in this hut, you share your bed with livestock. Not metaphorically, literally. And it's not weird. It's winter. Animals were part of the nightly lineup for most medieval peasants. If you were lucky enough to own a pig, a goat, or a chicken or two, chances are you weren't leaving them outside to become frost popsicles or easy prey for wolves. You brought them inside into the warmest room in the house, which, spoiler alert, was also the only room in the house. The pig, let's call her Matilda, isn't just here for warmth, though that's reason enough. She's also valuable. Meat, fat, leather, a walking pantry. But during winter, she's also a central heating unit with hooves. Her body radiates warmth like a small, fleshy stove, and she seems perfectly happy to stretch out in the family pile of blankets. You're spooning a pig, but she's clean. Cleanish. Okay, she's got a smell, but so does everyone else. The idea of animals in the house isn't just tolerated, it's strategic. Goats offer warmth and the occasional midnight bleat. Chickens are less useful for heat, but they lay eggs and poop wherever they please, which keeps everyone agile. If your family's more prosperous, maybe you've even got a calf inside. They're like massive, hairy furnaces that moo in their sleep. There are stories, possibly exaggerated, of families sharing beds with their donkeys. Not beside. In the bed. A bit much. But when the temperature's below freezing and your walls are more whole than house, you do what you must. And you'd better believe there's an unspoken hierarchy. The very old and the very young go in the middle. They get the most bodies pressed around them. The animals usually curl at the edge, or in your case, over your leg, like it's a log. You can't feel your toes, but Matilda is perfectly toasty. Historians still discuss how widespread this practice was. Some suggest it was more common in northern climates. Others argue it happened wherever people had small homes Big animals and no barns, which frankly was most people. Barns required land, wood, labor. If you were a subsistence farmer with 5 goats and a roof that leaked when it rained, you weren't investing in an animal mansion. You brought the heat source inside. There are even records of peasant homes designed specifically with livestock space built in a slightly sunken section of the one-room house where animals could sleep separated only by a low fence or some wishful thinking. Their body heat would rise, warming the family side slightly. Medieval radiant floor, heating courtesy of Bessie the cow. Now, of course, there were drawbacks. Pigs, while charmingly warm, snore loudly, and they drool. Matilda is no exception. Somewhere near your shin, a wet patch is forming. Chickens peck your feet. Goats will chew the corner of a blanket if you're not paying attention. And no matter how many herbs you scatter around the room, nothing masks the smell of warm, flatulent sheep. But the cold makes you forgiving. You'd rather wake up smelling like barn than not wake up at all. You remember last winter how one neighbor refused to bring her pig inside. Said it was unholy. Said the Lord wouldn't approve. The Lord didn't have to sleep in that hut. The pig died. So did she, a week later, from the cold and a cough that never left. Everyone else just nodded and scooped up their animals tighter. Fringe remedies from old wives' tales even suggest sleeping under a pigskin for warmth. Not exactly cuddly, but highly insulating. If your pig didn't make it to spring, you might sleep under her hide to ensure you did. Survival over sentiment every time. And while pigs are the warmest dogs, were the coziest. Farm dogs were lean loyal and always found the warmest spot first. A smart peasant let the dog curl at their feet and trusted it to bark at anything worse than a draft. You start to drift again, half lulled by Matilda's snuffling breath. She shifts her hooves, clicking against the straw. You pray she doesn't dream of running. In the darkness, you hear another animal sound. A soft cluck, a flap of wings. Someone's chicken has wandered loose. You brace for the inevitable moment when it hops up onto the blanket and tries to roost on your face. You sigh again, this time louder. It's just another night in the medieval bedfellow zoo. But here's the thing. It works. For all its weirdness, for the smells and the snorts and the suspicious stains, this system keeps you alive. Warmth is not optional in winter. And if that means snuggling a pig named Matilda, who occasionally farts in her sleep, so be it. You bury your nose in your sleeve and let your limbs go limp again. The air is still cold. The straw still pokes. The smoke still lingers. But there's warmth here. Honest, living, breathing warmth. And in the long, frozen dark of a medieval night, that's everything. It hits you suddenly, an urgent, unwelcome pressure in your lower belly. You blink awake, groggy and disoriented, then groan quietly into the wool wrapped around your face. Oh no, it's that time. Nature is calling. And unfortunately, medieval nature doesn't care that it's the middle of the night and your toes are colder than a saint's tombstone. You have to pee. But getting up means leaving the only warm microclimate in the universe. It means sacrificing the body heat of your sibling, your blanket, your pig. It means braving a hut that's maybe 5 degrees warmer than the outside maybe, but still cold enough to freeze soup. You lie perfectly still, weighing your options. Let's talk about what medieval peasants did when nature called at night. Spoiler, the answer wasn't walk to the nearest outhouse, because there probably wasn't one, especially not in winter, when snow and ice made outdoor nighttime bathroom trips a very real hazard. Peasants lived close to their needs, literally. Enter the chamber pot, It's a small ceramic or wooden bowl tucked under the bed or behind a barrel. You hope it's still there. You hope someone emptied it. You hope no one knocked it over during last night's pig chase incident. You fumble with your blanket, trying not to wake the pig or your snoring cousin. Your joints complain instantly as you shift into the frigid air. Your knees ache. Your back tightens. Your fingers tingle like they're being punished. You crawl over someone. They grumble in their sleep. You whisper an apology. You can't see anything, so you feel around the floor. Cold dirt, damp, rushes the occasional stray turnip, and finally, your fingers land on cold ceramic. Found it. Thank every minor saint. You squat. You aim. You try not to think about the fact that this thing is half full and lukewarm. Back in the day, some chamber pots were shared, especially in small homes. Yes, the whole family. Some even had their own nicknames. One old man in your village calls his old reliable. Another refers to it as Sir Drip-a-Lot. Humor is a survival tactic. Historians note that wealthier households sometimes had multiple pots, even decorative ones with painted designs. Yours plain, cracked, possibly older than you, but it does the job. There's a brief moment where your bare backside is exposed to the cold. You gasp quietly. The air bites like a spiteful squirrel. That's your reward for daring to relieve yourself. And don't get too comfortable, because the real fun comes when it's time to empty the pot. No one wants to do it. It smells, it splashes, and in winter, it can actually freeze solid if left too long. And heaven help the unlucky soul who knocks it over before it gets dumped into the compost heap or the river, or just flung out the door if you're feeling bold and no one's walking past. There are tales of chamber pot disasters. One neighbor tripped over theirs and broke a toe. Another dropped one mid-carry, shattering it and turning their floor into the worst-smelling skating rink in history. Fringe mentions in medical texts suggest mixing ashes or herbs into the pot to neutralize the humors. Really, it was about making the smell less horrific. Lavender worked best. Mint if you had it. A slice of apple if you were just showing off. You shuffle back toward the bed, stepping over the pig, trying not to bump the fire pit. Your toes are numb again. The floor is cold, slightly wet, and almost definitely home to at least one mushroom colony. You don't look. You don't want to know. You crawl back under the blanket. The warmth you left behind is gone, evaporated like goodwill after a family argument. Your spot is now a cold, resentful hole of regret. You curl into a ball, teeth clenched, waiting for the heat to return. The pig grumbles and flops back onto your shins. Your cousin sighs and steals half the blanket. Everything is terrible. But eventually, slowly, the layers of wool, human and livestock, recalibrate. Your legs tingle. Your chest warms. Your eyes start to drift again. Historians still puzzle over whether peasants had nighttime routines around relieving themselves, or if it was all improvisation and grumbling. The truth is likely both. Rituals help in a chaotic world, even if they're just muttering, "Don't freeze, don't fall, don't splash," on repeat. And yes, some tried holding it. But if you've ever tried sleeping with a full bladder while 3 other people breathe into your ear and a goat tries to eat your sock, it's not a winning plan. You settle in again, slightly more awake, slightly more grumpy, but with a blessedly empty bladder. The hut creaks. The wind howls. And the pot, it waits for someone else. You're finally warm again. Mostly. The pigs stopped shifting. Your cousin has stopped breathing directly into your eyeball, and the chamber pot has mercifully survived the night untouched. Just as you start to drift into what feels like actual rest, you remember another nightly ritual: the heating stones. At the far edge of the hearth, buried under ash and glowing embers, are a few smooth round stones, maybe fist-sized, maybe bigger. They're carefully selected. Not too porous, or they'll crack and spit. Not too rough, or they'll scrape skin. These are bed warmers, the medieval peasant's secret weapon against full-body frostbite. Earlier in the evening, someone placed them in the fire to heat slowly, knowing they'd be needed by midnight. Not for cooking, not for decoration, just for survival. And now it's your turn to fetch one. You groan softly, already dreading the return of the cold, as you inch back out from under your scratchy blanket cocoon. You fumble your way across the darkened room, using your toes like nervous little scouts. There's no light, but you've memorized the path well enough to avoid the pot, the pig, and the suspicious damp spot near the door. You reach the hearth. The stones are there, still warm, glowing faintly. Using a thick rag or a folded cloth wool, ideally you wrap one up quickly. You're not about to burn your hands. Not tonight, not again. These stones are ancient tech, older than anyone in the village. Before hot water bottles, before electric blankets, there were rocks, heated, wrapped, and slid between blankets to warm your bed before you climbed in, or kept beside your stomach to ward off cramps or winter coughs. Some families even had dedicated bedrocks that never left the hearth except for bedtime, like medieval teddy bears, but hotter and less cuddly. You shuffle back, carrying your volcanic treasure carefully. It radiates warmth through the cloth, small, comforting, primal. You wedge it down by your feet, where it can work on your frozen toes without roasting your thighs. And oh yes, that feels amazing. The stone radiates a slow, pulsing heat. It's not a furnace, but it's enough to thaw the edge of your mood. You press your feet around it, hissing softly as they tingle awake. But there's more in the peasant heating arsenal. Have you met urine-cured wool? You haven't lived until you've been offered a blanket that's been soaked in stale urine and dried stiff for warmth. Why? Because urine contains ammonia, and soaking wool in it helped soften the fibers, and so they claimed improve its insulating properties. Some people even believed it offered protection from lice and disease. Fringe? Absolutely. But it was a real thing, and depending on your neighbors, it might even smell familiar. And that's not the only trick. Some households used bedpans filled with coals, essentially a shallow metal tray, usually iron or brass, filled with glowing embers, then slid between sheets before bedtime. You had to be very careful. A little too much heat, and your bedding became a cautionary tale. But get it right, and your straw pile felt like a sunbeam in January. Historians still argue about how common heated bedding was among the peasantry. It's well documented among wealthier households. But in colder regions, some believe even modest families had their own version, if not with fancy pans, then with whatever metal vessel was available. One creative soul in your village used an old cooking pot with holes punched in the bottom and a long stick for handling. Smelled like soup, worked like a charm. Tonight, you've got your rock. It's not pretty, it's not high-tech, but as your toes thaw and your shivering finally stops, it feels like magic. Your cousin stirs. You pass them another cloth-wrapped stone, still warm. Sharing heat literally is part of the routine. The pig, unimpressed, snorts and shifts away, offended by the heat imbalance. There's a kind of equality to these nightly tools. Everyone has access to rocks. Everyone has the right to a little warmth, no matter how humble. And if your rock breaks, well, the village has a few new ones by the river, and you know just which ones heat without exploding. As you start to settle again, you press the rock against your stomach. Your body sighs. Even the lice seem to calm down. The fire is gone. The embers are barely a whisper. But with a wool blanket, a hot stone, and 2 layers of your sister's old tunics, you've built a passable imitation of warmth. You remember briefly how one family once heated bricks in the communal oven, baked all day with the villagers' bread, then handed out as warmers. That was the winter the baker lost a thumb. Too many embers, too few gloves. Sleep starts to return. This time, it's deeper, heavier, warmer. You nestle the stone closer and feel your body relax for the first time all night. It's not luxury, it's not comfort as we know it, but it's a victory. A small, glowing, perfectly toasted victory. And in a medieval winter, that's enough. You don't remember falling asleep, but you know exactly when you wake. Not because of noise, not because of cold, but because your eyes blink open into the inky dark, and everything around you is waiting. It's that strange hour again, the one with no name. Somewhere between the first sleep and the second. Not morning, not night. It's as if the world holds its breath. You lie there, eyes open aware. Not frightened, not alert, just suspended. And here's the thing, you're not the only one awake. Your cousin shifts, murmuring something under their breath. Your mother is sitting by the hearth, poking at the ashes with the iron tongs, coaxing the last bit of heat from the embers. Even the pig lifts its head briefly, as if stirred by something unseen. This is the watching hour, or as some 13th century monks called it, the waking. And it's perfectly normal. See, sleep didn't always come in one big chunk. Before artificial light, most humans, especially in medieval Europe, slept in 2 phases. The first sleep starting shortly after sundown and lasting about 4 hours, and the second beginning a couple of hours later and stretching until dawn. And in between, a curious pocket of time, quiet, internal, almost otherworldly. People didn't toss and turn, desperate to get back to sleep. They used this time. Some prayed. Monks actually scheduled matins, their early morning prayers, right during this midnight window, trusting that this strange period was when the soul might listen better. Others rose to tend fires, check animals, nurse babies. The more adventurous used the time for, well, couples activities. First sleep and second sleep were known euphemisms in some places for, shall we say, marital diplomacy. And yes, some told stories, some made food, some listened to the wind, to the wood creaking to whatever moved just beyond the walls. You sit up slowly, wrapping your cloak tighter. The fire has given up. You stir the ash with your foot and feel nothing but the dry crumble of last night's heat. But you're not tired. Not yet. Some scholars believe this bimodal sleep cycle, the 2-stage sleep pattern, was humanity's original rhythm. Before electric lights forced us into long artificial sleep blocks, we rested in waves. The middle wakefulness wasn't considered insomnia. It was considered opportunity. A fringe account from a 14th century physician even recommended using the midnight hour for reflection digestion, or a quick stroll around the room, though your version of stroll mostly involves not stepping in chicken poop. You think back to the old man in the village who swore that dreams were more truthful during second sleep, that the visions you have before dawn came from ancestors while first sleep dreams were just your brain rearranging the leftovers from the day. You're not sure that's true, but you do know one thing: the air in this hour feels different, sharper, quieter, expectant. There's no noise from outside, no birds, no carts, no footsteps, just the occasional whoosh of wind across the thatch and the soft snort of the pig. And yet, you're not alone. Not fully. People believed strange things about this time. Some called it the devil's hour, others the angels. One local legend claims that witches traveled during this waking period not because of the darkness, but because of the stillness. Even God sleeps. Then your great aunt once muttered, "You don't believe that. You think if anything's watching, it's very much awake." You reach for your heated stone, still warm though fading fast, and hold it close, breathing slowly. Out, in, out again. Your mind drifts, not quite dreaming, not quite thinking, just wandering. It's easy to imagine things in this moment, voices in the rafters' glowing eyes, in the hearth shadows, on the wall that move when you don't. But none of them come. Not tonight, just the dark, just the warmth you've managed to hold. Eventually, your mother lies back down, wrapping herself in her patched blanket with a tired grunt. The pig sighs like a disappointed monk. Even the chickens seem to settle. And you roll over the straw, crinkling softly beneath you, and feel the deep tug of second sleep pulling you downward. Historians still debate why this pattern changed. Some blame candles, more light, meant people stayed up later, compressing sleep into one block. Others point to industrial schedules forcing workers to rise early, sleep fast, and ignore the body's rhythm. But in this medieval night, the second sleep is sacred. It's the rest after rest, the dream after the dream. Your body curls tighter, your breath slows. Whatever the hour was for prayer, whispers, pig adjusting, you've passed through it. Now, the cold wraps around your hut like a blanket pulled too tight, and you disappear into dreams once again. The second sleep is the deepest. You don't wake easily from it, not even when the pig lets out a strangled grunt or your cousin mumbles in Latin again, and they definitely don't speak Latin, but something else is starting to stir. Not people. It's the itch, a tiny, tickling, maddening sensation right at the edge of your scalp. You shift groggy, scratch once, then again, then all over. Welcome to the joys of medieval personal hygiene, or more accurately, the lack thereof. Congratulations, you're sleeping with lice, and not just lice, fleas, bed bugs, maybe even mites, depending on the season and who last borrowed your blanket. These aren't occasional nuisances, they're year-round residents. Some of them have names. You've seen them jump from sibling to sibling like it's a relay race. You scratch your ankle and wonder briefly if your lice are interbreeding with the pigs. Peasants didn't just expect these pests, they lived with them like itchy, parasitic roommates. Sure, they complained, swore, slapped at their skin, but the idea of a bug-free bed was as fantastical as flying pigs. Actually, you've seen one of those in a fresco once. Still more likely than a clean tunic in January. The straw mattress you lie on, full of them. The wool blanket, a thriving metropolis. Your clothes, consider them portable flea colonies. Every part of you is warm, slightly damp, and rarely washed. It's heaven for vermin. You dig your fingers into your hair, trying to find the one causing the scalp itch. You find two. One bites you in protest. Historians tell us that medieval people bathed occasionally, maybe once or twice a year, unless you lived near a bathhouse rare, or were unusually fond of freezing to death in a bucket of river water. In winter, bathing was borderline dangerous. Wet skin and cold air, that's pneumonia just waiting to happen. Instead, people relied on dry cleaning, medieval style. That means rubbing with linen cloths, scraping with special tools, dusting with ashes or herbs. Some even used a dough-like paste to roll off dirt and grease. Effective, debatable. Entertaining to watch, absolutely. Your cousin scratches too. You glance at them through the dark. They're half asleep, half destroying the back of their neck. You feel a spark of solidarity. This is how it is. You itch together. Fringe practices did exist to fight the bugs. Some peasants hung dried herbs like wormwood tansy or lavender above their beds, hoping the scent would drive off pests. Others believed in smoke cleansing, standing in thick wood smoke to fumigate their clothes and ideally suffocate the freeloaders. More than one villager has passed out mid-process. You once tried rubbing garlic on your skin. You smelled like a soup. The fleas didn't mind. And then there's the scratching. It's rhythmic, familiar, almost soothing if it weren't so persistent. You start with one spot, your elbow maybe, and 5 minutes later, you're attacking your shins, your wrist, your scalp again. You wonder briefly if you've lost your mind. Medieval physicians had explanations, of course. Imbalanced humors, bad air, weak blood. One famous 14th century cure involved wrapping a dead toad in linen and sleeping with it under your pillow to draw out the insects. The toad died for nothing. You've heard of wealthier families owning silver lice combs carved with little saintly figures or Latin inscriptions. Yours is a bent nail, dragged through the hair once every Sunday and followed by a lot of swearing. Even in church, you've seen people scratching behind their ears or flicking something off their tunic during Mass. No one judges. Not really. Everyone itches. Everyone knows. But hygiene isn't just about bugs. It's also about skin, cracked, dry, weather-worn skin, especially in winter. Your hands feel like leather. Your knuckles are splitting. Your feet haven't fully dried in days, wrapped in the same cloth rags, stuffed inside stiff boots. There's a bowl of water somewhere in the hut, but it's frozen solid. And even if it weren't, it's grey and oily because someone used it to rinse turnips last night. Soap. Soap is for the rich. Or for washing clothes once a season when someone finds the energy to boil everything in a cauldron outside. And even then, it's lye soap, caustic and gritty, made from ashes and animal fat. It cleans, but it takes a layer of skin with it. Historians still argue whether medieval people were as dirty as we think. Some point to clean-shaven monks, detailed hygiene manuals, even archaeological evidence of combs and wash basins. Others say that's all for the upper classes, and that for peasants, especially in winter, clean meant not visibly muddy. You lie still again, trying to resist the scratch, just for a moment. The lice aren't trying to be cruel. They're just cold too. You wrap your cloak tighter and bury your head under the blanket, creating a little pocket of stifling warmth. You breathe in the smell of smoke, sweat wool, and something faintly like onions. It's comforting in a way. You'll scratch again soon. Everyone does. But right now, you're warm. Itchy, yes. A bit verminous, sure. But warm. And that's what matters. You're dreaming. At least you think you are. It's that kind of dream where you're still in your bed, in your hut, in the cold, but the shadows feel wrong. The corners are deeper. The ceiling stretches too high. And something is watching. You jolt awake, heart thumping. The fire is still dead. The pig is still snoring. Your cousin is chewing on their blanket again. But something else lingers in the room. Not smoke, not cold, fear. Because in the medieval world, night wasn't just dark, it was alive. You pull the blanket up to your chin and listen. Nothing. Just the crackle of your own breath, the soft scuffle of a mouse in the thatch above. And yet your skin prickles, like it knows something your mind doesn't. It's not just you. Everyone fears the night, especially in winter, when the dark stretches long and deep and seems to swallow the world. And when it's this cold and this quiet and you're lying awake, the mind wanders to strange places. This is when people whispered lullabies and prayers, not just to help children sleep, but to ward off what was listening. You remember one? Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John bless this bed I lay upon. You whisper it half out of habit, half in hope. Your grandmother taught it to you, telling you it kept the witches away. You didn't believe her. Now, you're not so sure. In medieval Europe, the line between sleep and the supernatural was paper thin. People believed that nightmares weren't just bad dreams, they were attacks. You didn't just have a nightmare, you were ridden by a night hag. You didn't just wake up with a heavy chest, you were sat on by a demon. Scholars point to records of mare spirits, which is where we get the word nightmare. These weren't imaginary terrors, they were feared creatures, thin, ghostly things that slipped through cracks in the wall and sat on your chest, stealing your breath while you slept. To prevent this, people prayed before bed. They hung charms over cradles. Some even drew protective signs on the wall near the hearth, simple crosses or stars scratched into the plaster with a knife. A fringe remedy involved keeping an old iron horseshoe under the straw bed to weigh down the devil. You remember your neighbor's hut, how they nailed sprigs of rowan and garlic to the door frame. Keeps the elves out, they said. You laughed, you were 7. They weren't. Not just elves either. In the dark, anything was possible. Night witches, wandering souls, restless saints, even the devil himself. One tale tells of a woman who woke to find her pig floating above her bed. No one ever saw the pig again. You turn onto your side. Your back is now exposed to the room, and immediately you regret it. Every hair on your neck lifts. You roll back quickly. It's fine. It's all fine. The fear of nighttime spirits was so common that people named their blankets after saints. Yours doesn't have a name, but you might consider it. There's even a bedtime prayer that includes a line about angels standing guard at the 4 corners. You once drew them in charcoal on the wall, one for each corner of the hut. By spring, the soot had faded, but you remember exactly where they were. The fear wasn't just childish. Adults felt it too. Even the priest at church would shiver when talking about the Noctis Tenebrosa, the nights of darkness. Not every night, mind you. Just the ones when the wind didn't blow and the fire wouldn't stay lit, and the dog refused to sleep near the door. Historians still argue whether these fears were born from superstition or survival. After all, when your world is one room, one light, one door against the void, it makes sense to imagine what might be out there. You pull the blanket tighter. Try humming. A lullaby maybe. Something soft. Sleep, sleep. Rest your head. No ghosts tonight beneath the bed. A song your mother used to sing. Her mother too. The melody's shaky now, but the rhythm is familiar. It helps. You feel something warm press against your side. The pig. She's rolled toward you again, oblivious to your anxiety. She farts softly. And just like that, the tension breaks. You chuckle under your breath. Maybe the spirits are real, maybe they aren't. But they'd have to be pretty brave to take on a snoring pig, 3 lice-infested blankets, and a peasant who's already on their 5th nightmare this week. You close your eyes again. Say the little rhyme one more time, just in case, and let the dark fold in around you. You don't know how long you've been asleep, but suddenly you're on your feet. Your heart is hammering. Your feet are ice, and you're in the corner. You blink. You look around. You're standing in the shadows facing the wall, one hand still outstretched, as if you were reaching for something in a dream. But you're not dreaming now. Someone behind you stirs, then whispers, again. You turn slowly, confused, your body still asleep, even though your eyes are open. It's happened before. You're a sleepwalker, and in the medieval world, that makes you either chosen or cursed. In your village tales of nighttime wanderers go back generations. Some say it's the mark of a holy soul, a sign that your spirit is drawn toward the divine even when your body rests. Others think it's darker, that your soul slips out at night and dances with demons, leaving your shell behind. And some believe you're just looking for the outhouse and took a wrong turn. You shuffle back to bed, half ashamed, half spooked. No one says anything else. No one needs to. Everyone's seen it before. A cousin who muttered scripture in their sleep. A grandmother who walked into the cold and had to be dragged back from the snow. A child who sang with her eyes closed in a voice that didn't sound like her own. There's no word for parasomnia here. There's only folklore. Sleepwalking isn't new, and it certainly isn't rare. Even in the 1300s, it's whispered about in churches and markets. The sleeper walked again, someone might say, over a bowl of gruel, and the others would nod grimly. Best keep a candle burning, someone would add, as if light could anchor a wandering soul. A fringe legend tells of a monk who walked the length of a cathedral every night in his sleep, always stopping before the altar. They called him blessed. Another tale insists a boy vanished from his home and was later found asleep on the roof. They called him cursed. Historians today debate how sleepwalking was truly viewed. Was it spiritual? Was it medical? Did people simply accept it as another mystery of the body, like hiccups or sneezing into your porridge? You lie back down now, shivering though not from cold. Your fingers twitch. For a moment, you're not sure if you're awake or if this blanket, this pig, this endless scratching is still part of the dream. And then your foot brushes against your cousin's elbow, and he mutters a very real, very annoyed, "Watch it." You're definitely awake now. But sleep does strange things to medieval minds. Dreams, for instance, weren't just dreams. They were omens, messages, portals. Entire books were written on dream interpretation. Did you dream of a river that meant change, a pig luck, a falling tooth, death in the family, or maybe too much cheese at supper? People recorded their dreams in letters. Clergy preached about them. Midwives asked about them before births. And if your dream included certain animals, black dogs, snakes, birds flying backward, you might even be hauled before a priest. There are stories of people who acted out their dreams while asleep, shouting or laughing or sobbing. They were said to be touched by spirits, either angelic or not. A girl in a nearby hamlet once sat up in bed and told everyone about a fire in the next village. 2 days later, the mill burned down. Coincidence? Maybe. You once dreamed of drowning in a pond only to wake up with your blanket tangled around your face. Probably just poor ventilation. But still, you avoid that pond now. You turn over careful not to disturb the pig and pull the covers tight. You whisper a few sleepy words, not a prayer exactly, but a ward. Your mother taught you this one. 4 lines, old and crooked as a tree root, meant to protect the dreamer from wandering too far. You say it twice, just in case, because the night isn't just a time for rest. It's a space between worlds, between waking and dreaming, between body and soul, between safety and something else. You feel your limbs grow heavy again. Your thoughts begin to wander, but this time you grip them tighter. You try to hold on to reality, the scratch of straw beneath you, the distant grunt of livestock, the faint scent of smoke clinging to wool. You remind yourself you are in your bed. You are not on the roof. You are not walking into the snow. Not tonight. Tonight you'll stay grounded, right here beside the pig. When you next open your eyes, it's still dark, but it's a different dark. Softer, lighter around the edges. The kind of dark that promises sunrise, not more shadows. You lie there, very still, and listen. The wind outside has quieted. The roof no longer groans. Something about the air feels less sharp. You can almost taste morning, and that means something else too. The night is almost over. But there's one last thing to notice, something you might not have paid attention to until now. It's subtle, slow, invisible to the eye unless you're looking very closely. Your body is waking up differently. Because in medieval times, the seasons shaped your sleep deeply. You haven't always slept like this, not in high summer. Not when the days stretched long and the night felt like a brief intermission between work and more work. No, this long, stretched, bundled, broken, pig-snuggling night is winter's gift. Or maybe it's punishment. You roll onto your back and stretch beneath the blanket. You've been in and out of sleep now for 10 hours, maybe more. Not that you're counting. There's no clock on the wall, no phone screen to squint at. You tell time by the feel of your limbs and the color of the sky leaking through the smoke hole. In summer, you'd already be awake, because medieval sleep changed with the sun. In the warmer months, people slept less and worked more. The daylight dictated everything. You rose with the sun labored until it dipped again, and used whatever light you had left to finish your chores or eat your gruel before sleep took over like a tidal wave. And summer sleep was different, shorter, lighter, less layered. No pigs in bed, no 20 pounds of wool crushing your chest, just a shirt maybe, and the air so warm you could sleep without socks. Imagine that. But in winter, the sun barely shows its face. Days shrink to shadows. Nights stretch like melted wax. People didn't just adapt, they transformed. They slipped into a slower rhythm. More sleep, more stillness, more time between tasks. Winter sleep was deeper, not just in length, but in intensity. You wrapped yourself not just in blankets, but in silence, in ritual, in waiting. Historians studying medieval diaries and letters note this shift clearly. In summer entries speak of urgency, movement, task lists. In winter, reflection, dreams, observation, even spiritual insights. The monks of old spoke about winter sleep as a sacred silence, a time when God whispered in the hours between dusk and dawn. Farmers knew it too. They worked less, they slept more, and if they were wise, they didn't fight it. Modern science would back them up. Circadian rhythms respond to light. Melatonin surges in darkness. The body wants longer rest in winter. It's biological. You're not lazy. You're seasonal. Of course, peasants couldn't always indulge in this rhythm. Animals still needed feeding. Fires still needed stoking. Children still needed yelling at. But when they could, they let winter slow them down. And now, in your narrow, straw-filled bed, you feel that weight, the heaviness of rest that's about to end. You pull the blanket tighter, reluctant. Outside the hut, the first rooster hasn't crowed yet, but he will, soon. You think about summer again, how your sleep was shorter but cooler. You remember sweating under the roof in July, the thatch acting like a sponge, trapping the day's heat and radiating it back down like punishment. You remember sleeping near the door just to catch a breeze. You remember the flies? Ugh, the flies, you don't miss them. You'd take 100 frozen toes over one fly in your ear. Even the smell of winter sleep is different. Less rot, more smoke, less manure, more wool. You can breathe without gagging. That's progress. A fringe tale from an old woman in the next village tells of a sleeping saint, a woman who only woke once a week during winter, claiming her soul traveled through the snow while her body rested. Was she a prophet? A fraud? Just really good at avoiding chores? Hard to say, but her story lives on. Like all stories, tied to winter's hush. You sit up slowly now. Your muscles are stiff, your joints aching. But there's a sense of completion to it. As if your body is saying, that's enough for one night. You made it. And you have. You stretch your arms, shaking a little, as they rise above your head. A thin light glows through the smoke hole above grey, hesitant, like the sun isn't sure it wants to do this today. You can relate. Your cousin groans beside you. The pig stirs and lets out a sound that might be a burp. A chicken somewhere flaps, once thumps into something wooden, and mutters in outrage the day has not yet begun. But night, long, cold, restless, sacred, itchy, and oddly beautiful winter night is ending. And with it, a part of you wakes that only winter ever sees. You stay there, sitting up in the bed, or what passes for a bed, with your blanket still wrapped tight around your shoulders like a makeshift cape. The air is soft now, damp but not biting. The kind of cold that settles with you instead of against you. You rub your eyes, crusted with smoke, and sleep. Someone near the hearth stirs your mother maybe. She's trying to coax life from the ashes again, poking at the cold embers with a stick that once might have been part of a fence post. There's a kind of ritual to it. This early stirring, this quiet hush before the day begins. You don't speak, you just watch, and then you hear it. That sound. Crack. A chunk of thatch falls from the roof into the middle of the floor. A puff of dust and straw flutters up like sleepy confetti. You all freeze. Then someone mutters, "Not again," because what you've just heard is the roof giving way. Again. When it snows overnight, really snows. It builds up on the roof like an uninvited guest, heavy and silent. And when the thatch is old or damp or sagging, or all three, sometimes it caves in. Not all at once, of course, not dramatically. It's not like a fairy tale where the house collapses and takes you with it. No, this is slow motion decay. First, a soft drip, then a tear, then a thud as part of your ceiling becomes your new carpet. You crawl across the floor to check. The snow has made it in. Not much yet, but it's enough to soak the straw where the pig sleeps. She eyes you unimpressed. You sigh, then grab the small broom from the wall hook. It's really just a bundle of twigs, and sweep the worst of it toward the door. Your cousin sneezes as a bit of snow hits their bare foot. The morning has begun. And this is how it often begins in a peasant's winter world. Not with sunshine and hymns, but with crumbling walls, leaking roofs, and snow where snow should absolutely not be. You look up at the roof. The smoke hole is still open, and flakes float down through it like tiny white lines. The thatch around it is dark with wetness. You make a mental note to check it later. And by you, of course, you mean someone else, preferably taller. Historians note that many peasant homes needed regular maintenance, especially in winter. But maintenance is a generous word for stuffed moss in the wall and hoped for the best. When roofs failed, families didn't file repair requests. They patched it with whatever they had, more straw bits of old clothing, or sometimes entire baskets, pressed flat and nailed into place. You reach for your outer cloak, now frozen stiff near the hearth. and wrestle it around your shoulders. It smells like smoked wool and mild despair. You don't bother changing. Who does? You slept in your clothes, you'll live in your clothes, and by next week, they'll practically be part of your skeleton. But before you rise fully, before the day presses its full weight on your spine, you allow yourself one more moment of stillness. Because as bad as winter sleep can be, cold, loud, cramped, itchy, it's also safe. Inside this hut, despite the creaking beams and falling snow, you've survived another night. You didn't freeze. The pig didn't roll onto your face. The lice didn't drive you screaming into the forest. And the demon from your dreams didn't follow you home. That's a win. You rise now. Your joints pop like kindling. You grab your boots, still damp, and shove your feet into them with grim determination. One day, someone will invent dry socks. You vow to live long enough to see it. As you help stir the fire back to life, a question tugs gently at the back of your mind. How did people do this every night for centuries? And the answer is simple. Because they had to. Because life didn't offer them a better option. And because even when sleep was broken into strange chunks, and pigs were bedfellows, and snow slipped through your roof like a thief, it still offered rest. Maybe not the dreamy, silk-sheeted rest of kings, but something quieter, heavier, realer. Peasant sleep was survival, yes, but it was also a kind of stubborn grace. A warm stone under your feet, a shared blanket that never quite covered everyone. The knowledge that even if the world was bitter and hard and full of drafts, you could close your eyes for a while and still wake up whole. And now, as the door creaks open and the first light spills in blue and pale and weak, you brace for the day. Because sleep may be over, but winter is not. And so now, here we are. The embers have gone quiet. The animals are stirring. The roof is holding for now. And in that cold, smoky little hut, the night has given way to something like morning. You've made it. Not just through the cold or the darkness, but through all the strange and scratchy rituals that came with sleeping in the medieval world. You've curled up beside straw and stone, whispered against shadowy corners, and shared your warmth with humans and beasts alike. You've remembered what it's like to sleep not for comfort, but for survival. Now let your breath slow. Picture that tiny window again, the one cut into the thatch, where snow sometimes slips in, but so does the softest light. Let that light settle on your face. Let it remind you that outside this hut, the world still turns. The snow will melt. The days will stretch again. For now you rest. No more scratching. No more fire tending. Just your heartbeat steady and slow, nestled in a memory of woolwood and whispered prayers. Breathe in, breathe out. Whatever dreams find you next, let them be warmer. Let them come gently, like the hush that falls when even the pigs fall silent. Sleep well, traveler. You've earned it.